Military Mom Talk Radio is here with a powerful platform for women to discuss their ideas, issues, and concerns with respect to the military lifestyle. Military Mom Talk Radio encourages you to share your experiences of being a military wife and mother. This show is dedicated to educating your family about the resources that are available in both the public and private sector. And we'll be sharing helpful information from women around the world. We'll cover everything military, from helping a family member cope with post-traumatic stress disorder, to navigating government programs dealing with family issues, to the struggles of deployment, along with being a working mother, both in and out of the home. This is Military Mom Talk Radio. And here are your hosts, Tina Gonzalez and Sandra Beck.
Hey, military moms, this is Sandra Beck, and we are here today for our post-motherhood show. Mother's Day was yesterday, so we want to wish a happy Mother's Day to my mother, Gloria, to Rick's mom. Rick, what's your mom's name?
Karen.
Karen, and we got Doug on the line here. Doug, what's your mom's name?
Her name is Ivy.
And Ivy, okay, so we're going to say Happy Mother's Day to not only our moms, but the other moms out there. And for those of you listening in who missed Tina, Tina will be joining us later in the show. She is an emergency child care provider for Camp Pendleton, and she just got some extra kids in today. So until she's able to get things under control over there, Rick has agreed to step in. We have such a great show today, Rick. You are from a career military family, right?
That is correct. I have both of my grandfathers were in the military. My mom's dad was in the Air Force for 22 plus years.
And was your dad military too?
My dad was not. His father was in the Army for about 4 years prior to him being born, but no, he's not military at all.
He's not military. My dad was military. My dad was in the Navy, and he served in Korea. And my ex-father-in-law, who I'm very fond of, flew a P-38 in World War II.
Wow.
So, yeah, pretty cool. And it's such a perfect marriage, our topic today, because we have, this outstanding, documentary film, The Mother of Normandy. We're so glad, Doug, to have you on today. It's just a perfect motherhood show for Military Mom Talk Radio. Can you tell us a little bit about your documentary?
Sure. It's called Mother of Normandy, the story of Simone Renaud. And Simone Renaud was the wife of Mayor Alexander Renaud, who was the mayor of Sainte-Mère-Église, which was the first French town liberated in the Normandy invasion. And it's a story about her and her husband taking care of the soldiers that died in the Normandy invasion. They end up putting 3 temporary cemeteries in their town, and altogether there was about 15,000 American soldiers buried there. And her husband actually got a few dozen letters from America when the first Western Union telegrams started coming back home saying that your son or your husband has been killed in the war. And so a few dozen letters first started coming just to attention the mayor, not even knowing his last name was Renaud, just attention the mayor of Sainte-Mère-Église, and all the letters pretty much said the same thing. We're told our son or my husband has been killed in the war, and if it's not asking too much, could you go to his grave for us and put some flowers on it and take a picture and send it back to us? And basically the mayor said to his wife, Simone, said, we must help these people. And she said, I will do it. So she went and started finding the graves of the soldiers, of the letters from the families, and she started doing exactly that. And she would write a letter of comfort back to them, and then they would write a letter back to her. And there was this correspondence that started happening with these few dozen families. And then in about a month or two later, General Teddy Roosevelt Jr., who was the son of President from 1905. Died of a heart attack, and he was buried in one of the cemeteries. I believe it was cemetery number 2. And Madame Renaud was putting flowers on his grave, and a Life magazine photographer got a snapshot of it. And
that's that famous photograph that we see everywhere.
Yes, it's a famous photograph, and it came out in August 7th, 1944. And now it became the people who had lost a husband or a son or a brother put the 2 and 2 together, because the caption said, this is, Simone Renaud, wife of the mayor of Sainte-Mère-Église, and she's keeping General Teddy Roosevelt Jr.'s grave decked with flowers. And so now people knew that if their son or, like I said, a family member was buried in Sainte-Mère-Église, they put the connection that this lady puts flowers on the grave. So she got hundreds, if not thousands, of letters coming to her, and she basically answered every one and did it dedicated her life to doing it for the next 40 years. And she died in 1988, I believe, but her three sons, have continued to be this link with the French and the Americans, and it's still happening today.
Now, you've been there, and you've been to the cemetery. How many people are actually buried in the cemetery?
Well, the cemeteries in Sainte-Mère-Église were temporary cemeteries. So from 1944 to 1948, they were there, and then the War Department made a decision to exhume the bodies and to either have them sent back to America to the families. They would have a choice to have them sent back to their hometown or Arlington or wherever they were to be buried, or they could stay in Norman soil, but they were going to be moved about 30 kilometers south of Sainte-Mère-Église, which is where the Omaha Beach Colville Cemetery is today. So a lot of the bodies, I think about 60% were sent back to America, and about 40% stayed there. And in the Omaha Beach Cemetery today, there's about 9,300, something like that, bodies buried there.
Wow. So it's no small feat. She wasn't tending to, because when you mentioned you're grave number 2, we're not talking about, 10 graves here. We're talking about lots and lots of soldiers buried there.
Yeah, about 10 times the population of the town was the graveyard. Yeah, about 15,000 in the town.
Now, how did you come across this story? I mean, it's a beautiful story, and it's perfect. For a Mother's Day show, but it's kind of an obscure, it's a famous photograph. But how did you come to make this documentary?
Well, I wasn't looking for it. I was actually over in Normandy back in, I think, 2003, which I think was the 59th anniversary. And I was doing a project on some British World War II veterans that had landed there, and I was filming them, and while my main cameraman was coming across the channel with them on the ferry, me and the other cameraman / audio guy were over in Normandy a couple days ahead of time. So I had said, let's go down to Sainte-Mère-Église, even though this was a project about British veterans. I said, since it's the 60th anniversary, let's talk to some of the American veterans and see why they come here every year to celebrate the anniversary. So we went down to Sainte-Mère-Église. I knew the history. That's where the paratroopers landed, and they came in at Utah Beach there, and ended up meeting Bill Tucker, who was an 82nd Airborne paratrooper who landed about 200 yards outside the town in a field, and he had let me interview him the next day, and through that I met Madame Renaud's youngest son, Maurice, while we were interviewing Bill. And what had happened is that he saw the camera equipment, and he said, "Hey, Bill, what's going on with the cameras?" And he said, "Oh, these guys are doing a documentary on some British guys, but they wanted to interview me because I'm an American, I was a veteran." And so this guy sat, I didn't know who this guy was at the time, and he just sat down. He said, "Let me tell you something." He put his arm around Bill and said, and we had the cameras rolling, we got all this on film, and he said, "Let me tell you something. We French people, we love the Americans, and we love the veterans, and we'll never forget what they did for us to liberate us, and we invite them back. Can come back to our country and our town and to Normandy whenever they want. We love them, and we'll never forget what they did for us." And I said, "Wow." I said, "That's great to hear." I said, "Now, who are you?" And Bill said, "Oh, this is Maurice Renaud. His father was the mayor of the town during the invasion." And so that's how I first met Maurice. And then I asked Maurice some information, and he said, well, he was only 2 years old in 1944, so he said he had learned all about it from his brothers and his parents, but he said, my brother, Henri Jean, who was 10 years old, is standing behind you, because we were at the museum that day, at the Airborne Museum, and we were outside in this little plaza area. And so I went and introduced myself to Henri Jean, and I asked him if I could interview him, and he told me that I could. So we went over by the pharmacy, which was where his father was the pharmacist of the town, and we I got him with the pharmacy behind him, and he told me that he remembers. I said, "What did you remember on D-Day morning?" And he said, "Well, we remember the planes coming, and then we were kind of scared, and my father was out. There was a fire that was, a house that was on fire that night." And he said, "I remember when eventually we went to sleep, and then when we got up early in the morning, he said, I could remember seeing these little red dots in the church plaza, and we didn't know what they were at first, and then we realized that they were cigarettes, the tip of the cigarettes, and they figured, well, it couldn't be the Germans because they wouldn't smoke at night to give away their positions, so they thought it was the British. And then as the light came up, they realized it was American GIs, and that was his. Then he got to go out that morning, and he said he can remember seeing some of the paratroopers, hanging in the trees, and dead Germans and dead paratroopers, and that was quite a lot for a 10-year-old.
I can imagine. Doug, I don't mean to cut you off, but we're going to need to go to break in a minute. We are here with documentary film producer Doug Stebleton. His website, if you want to check it out, is www.motherofnormandy.com. I'm also here with my temporary co-host, Rick Swanson. We'll see you guys back after the break.
Welcome back to Military Mom Talk Radio on TogiNet.com, covering topics to help on the home front, with help from those who know how the system works and how to work the system. It's more fun than a sail at the BX. Now, let's get back to it. It's Military Mom Talk Radio. Here again are your hosts, Tina Gonzalez and Sandra Back.
Hey, military moms. We have a great post-Mother's Day show for you today. We have documentary film producer Doug Stebleton. I'd welcome you to check out his website at www.motherofnormandy.com. And we have Tina back. Tina, we're so happy to have you on the show today. You had a little bit of trouble that you want to share it with us about why you couldn't make the first segment?
Oh, yeah. I am a daycare provider on base, and we had a little emergency thing with one of our moms on base, so I had to take her kids in for a little bit, but everything's good and everything's fixed, so I'm here now.
That's so great. How was your Mother's Day yesterday?
It was really, really nice. It was relaxing. It was supposed to be a pretty day is what I thought, but it was ugly in the morning, so kind of ruined the whole beach thing that we were planning, but it was so nice. I got catered to all day. It was lovely.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Well, I'm going to say goodbye to Rick. Rick, thank you for helping us today.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's always fun to have somebody to talk to when we open the show. And Tina, you were missed.
But it's okay, Rick was there. Thank you so much, Rick, for filling in.
Yeah, he's gone. So, Tina, we have such a great guest today. We've got Doug Stebleton of Mother of Normandy. And, Doug, before we went to break, I had to cut you off. Can you finish the story you were telling from the first segment about...
I'll briefly wrap it up. Basically, as I said, I interviewed Henri Jean, and then he said something, and he said, my mother and father were very committed to the veterans, and they loved them, and then he said, the letters I could show you, and I said, what letters? And he said, well, can you come to my house? And I said, sure. So we went to his house, which was a minute drive, and then as we drove in, there was a gentleman in the parking lot talking to another man, and it ended up being his brother Paul, who was 14 years old on D-Day, and I got a chance to talk to him a little and learn about what he remembered. And then Henri Jean, brought me in his den and showed me this big photo album of him and Bill Tucker, the 82nd Airborne guy that I had met, and he had told me that they had been friends since the late 50s and had continued to travel over to Cape Cod to see him, and their kids knew each other and their grandkids, and he said, we have this link between the French and Americans that we will keep going for, they hope it goes on forever. And then in that meeting, he showed me a book. He had about 10 little books, or 3-ring binder books with American flags on them. And I said, out of everything in your office, I said, what's the most important thing to you? And he pulled out one of these binder books, and it was a book that had all these letters in it and pictures of GIs and stuff. And I said, who are these? He said, these were from these are my mother's and my father's. And I asked why. And then he told me the whole story about the cemeteries being there and the letters that first came in, and how his mother, responded to them, and then the Life magazine photo, and that's when I realized, wow, this is a whole other story, and that's how I decided to make it into a documentary when I found out about it.
That's so amazing.
Yeah.
When you think of Mother's Day and the title of your project, Mother of Normandy, truly, that's it's such a loving. It's such a loving thing to do. It's such an outstanding thing to do, and it's something that I don't know of anything else done like that anywhere in the world.
I don't know. It could be done in some other countries, but I don't know. I just know that this was a story that was known a little in the military community through the years, but not on a wide global basis. And that's what we're hoping to do now with the film, and to show how one person can really make a difference in other people's lives.
Well, and you're making a difference, with what you're doing. And, what's interesting is, I was looking at your biography here. You have a background in music. You're from Montana. Can you give our listeners an idea about, kind of who Doug Stebleton is? And, you don't have a military background.
No, I don't. My father was in the Navy, but he missed the war. He was too young to get in, and he spent 1946 and 47 over in the Pacific on a ship doing occupational, type services over in Japan. So, but my grandfather was in the military. So, but I've always just I remember going as a young kid. My dad was with the VFW and the American Legion and playing cards and stuff. So I remember always going to visit him there, and I was just always astounded by all the pictures on the wall of the veterans. So I've always had a love for the veterans, and that's continued as I've gotten older, and now I just have this passion to try to, make films that honor them and their sacrifices. So that's kind of my background with my family. But I've never been in the service, no.
But we all serve the military in different ways. Not everybody fights, not everybody serves. On base or off base. There's so many, military providers, both,
sure.
In the public and private sectors that, make such a difference. That I look at what you're doing, and you actually have a music background.
Yeah, well, as you said, my background, I am from Montana. I'm from a little town called Glasgow, Montana, and I came out to Hollywood in 1984, and I went to a music school called Musicians Institute because I was a guitar player. It was a one-year school, and I went there and learned a lot, and when I graduated, I made a decision to I had a decision to make, either go back to the small town or stay here in Los Angeles, and I really liked being here. And so I ended up getting a job as a valet parker at the Beverly Hills Hotel, which was a great job. And while working there, I met a lady who had a music publishing company, and she offered me an internship, and I took it, and I interned for her for about a year, and then I ended up getting offered a job, and I ended up working with her for about 9.5 years. And that was a great experience. And then left there and went to a record label for about a year and a half, and then just decided to start my own company, which I did back in 1999. And around 2004, as a music publisher, my expertise was always music, getting songs in TV shows and movies. So it was always music in film and TV. So the transition to starting producing films was a pretty easy transition for me. And that's how I decided to start to do some of these documentaries, and that's kind of my main focus now.
That's amazing. One of the things that always, it never ceases to amaze me when we do, what we're supposed to do. And after having lunch with you and meeting you in person, I really feel that, you're on path of doing what you're supposed to do, because there's been so many times that things just fall into place, and we really don't think about, serendipity or, things being divinely laid out for us. But there's been some really interesting things. The one that comes to mind, particularly from our conversation, was the one about the place in Long Island. That was just amazing how that all fell into place. Can you share with our listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can. That was definitely not planned at all. Basically, Doug Stebleton, who's a good friend of mine, and at the time I had only known him maybe a year, but he's a songwriter and lyricist, and he'd written songs with another producer, a songwriter that I knew, and I started getting his songs in some film and TV shows out here in LA, and I was already about a year into maybe just starting the Mother of Normandy project. We were still filming at the time, and I was coming out to New York to do some business, and he had said, "Hey, well, come out to Long Island and visit me, and I'd love to have you hang out for a few days." So I said, "Great." So I went to visit him in Long Island at this little town called Locust Valley, which I'd never been to Long Island. This was my first time. And his wife, Kathy Soroff, we got along great, and she was a big history buff. So when she had wanted to find out what my documentary was about, I told her, and she loved it. She loved the idea of honoring the veterans and what Madame Renaud did. And so when I got back to Los Angeles, I called Maurice Renaud, who was my kind of point guy. He's the youngest son of the Renauds, and he was the one that I've been working with closely the closest with on the film. And he had said to me, so how are things going? And I said, oh, things are going good. I said, I just got back from visiting a friend in New York, out on Long Island, from this little town called Locust Valley. And there was dead silence on the other end of the phone. And he said, Locust Valley? I said, yeah. I said, you've heard of that place? He goes, I know this town. And I said, really? I said, I didn't even know anything about it till I met my friend from there. And he goes, yeah, Locust Valley, Long Island. I said, well, what do you know about it? He goes, I know this town. He said, after the war, this town sent us all kinds of food and candy and medical supplies and things that we needed to help rebuild our town. I said, really? And he said, yeah. And I said, wow. I said, I got to tell Kathy Soroff this. She'll trip out. So I called Kathy and I told her, and she had no idea about this. So she said, let me check with the Historical Society and the library. And sure enough, she did. And she called me back and she said, Doug, you're right. Maurice was right. She says, back in 1947, a lady and an 82nd Airborne paratrooper guy who was in the war and landed in Sainte-Mère-Église started this thing called Operation Democracy, and it was a sister city program to help different cities get back in Europe, get back on their feet after the war. And the reason they picked Sainte-Mère-Église was, one, it was the first town liberated, and two, General Teddy Roosevelt Jr. was buried there, and Oyster Bay is I guess it's called a hamlet of Oyster Bay, and so they picked it because he was from there, and so we found this connection between her town and my little town that I was doing my project about, and it's part of the film now, and there's a whole they actually Operation Democracy has been rebirthed because of me knowing Doug and Kathy and Kay Winiger, who's also part of it. They've started a whole new thing to help other sister cities, and they're going to do it, I think, over in Iraq and Afghanistan. And she also found a poem that was interesting in her research. She found a poem that Madame Renaud wrote called Locust Valley, and it was all about Locust Valley, helping their town. And Kathy said, we're going to have to put this on a big rock in a bronze plaque right in the middle of the city, of the town, and her and Kay actually did that, and it's sitting there today, and it's a beautiful thing for the history, for the civic pride of the town to know what they did, 60 years ago. So anyway, very serendipitous or divinely appointed, I don't know, but it's pretty neat how it happened.
Well, I think, when we're out there doing what we're supposed to do, and there's so many facets of being an American, being in the military, and serving the military, it's always, it's not surprising to me, but it's always amazing to me when we go out and we do good things, how everything just seems to fall into place. And we are here today with Tina Gonzalez, and we have Doug Stebleton, the documentary film producer of Mother of Normandy, motherofnormandy.com, and we are going to go to commercial break. Hey, we are here at Military Mom Talk Radio. I have my lovely co-host, Tina Gonzalez. Tina, you're having a bad day, honey.
Yeah, it's been one of them days.
Yeah,
I woke up smiling,
we're not going to throw any questions over to you. We're just going to ask you to just sit there and have that bad day.
Thank you, Sandra. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good. So we are also here with Doug Stebleton. He is the documentary film producer behind Mother of Normandy, which will be airing at the GI Film Festival, among some other places, which we're going to talk about in our third segment, of where you can go to see this film, and perhaps having Doug come to your base or come to your location and do his own little mini film festival for you guys. Doug, when you were putting this film together, I don't know much about documentary film production, and certainly not something with such a magnificent historical perspective as Mother of Normandy, which you guys can check it out at motherofnormandy.com, just like how it spells all one word. Can you talk a little bit about, kind of the production aspect of the documentary, kind of like when did you start, how did you raise the money, and then also can you tell us a little bit about dealing with, you're dealing with letters, these are personal effects that belong to people, and then you've got rights issues with film footage. I mean, there's, you talk about, biting off a lot for one documentary. You kind of, win the golden prize on this one.
Yeah, it's been a journey, a good journey though. I guess it started off as soon as I talked to Maurice, about doing this, and he came to San Francisco and we met, and I told him if I'm going to do it and invest my time, I need to get the rights from him so nobody else can do it, and that was not a problem. He said, I'm a businessman, I understand. So we took care of that, and I said, well, who are the veterans that were the closest, to your mom and dad? And he mentioned 4 guys. He said they were close to a lot of them, but there was 4 that really stuck out, and they were Bill Tucker, Bob Murphy, Bob Piper, and Don Lassen. And he said, out of those 4 guys, 2 of them have cancer. And he said, so you really need to move quick. So I got my cameraman, and we headed off to Daytona Beach and interviewed Bob Piper, and then up to Cape Cod to get, I think it was Bill Tucker. And so I just got on it as quick as I could, and then just started interviewing people, and went to Normandy and did some filming there, and did reenactment scenes there of made a little cemetery that we used to shoot various scenes. And I went one December just to Sainte-Mère-Église during the winter, and I just spent a week there scanning pictures from Henri Jean's family, album of their whole, from their father and mother back in the early days in the 20s and stuff. And so yeah, just doing everything I could. As a documentary maker, you need pictures are very important to help tell the story. Interviews, talking heads, reenactment footage. As you said, also licensing some other film footage. I licensed some footage from the movie The Longest Day, 20th Century Fox movie, which was all about the D-Day invasion, and had some big names in there like John Wayne and Henry Fonda, who actually played Teddy Roosevelt Jr. in the movie. And that movie is very famous for the scene when Red Buttons, who was an 82nd Airborne paratrooper, jumped out of the plane and this parachute got caught on the church steeple. Well, that's the town that my film was about, that Madame Renaud and the mayor was the mayor of, is Sainte-Mère-Église. And so that town became very famous because of that movie. It really, from a global standpoint, everybody knew that that's the town where the guy got caught on the church steeple with his parachute. So yeah, there was just a lot of things to do to get it done, and from a financial standpoint, in Hollywood the number one rule is never use your own money, which is a great rule. But for me, it's like I knew the veterans, these World War II veterans, they're all at the time when I was they're in their late 70s or early 80s, 80, 81, 82, 83. And it's like I couldn't really wait for someone to come up and give me the money. It's difficult to raise money. And so I just used my own money to get things going, to start doing the interviews and doing some traveling over there. And then eventually I did get a thing called a fiscal sponsorship that I found out about, that I got to go underneath the International Documentary Association 501c3 umbrella, so I could raise some money as donations through individuals or corporations, and it would be tax deductible, to the donator. And so I raised some money that way, and then I got some friends in the last year to give me the last amount so I could finish the post production. But it was a five-year process. It didn't happen overnight.
A 5-year process, and how much? I'm not going to ask you how much you put in, but how much total has the documentary cost at this point? Just rough estimate.
Well, rough estimate, probably $200,000.
That's amazing. I mean, for people to put this money into something that's so vital and so important, it's part of our living history.
Yeah, it is, and it's a lot of money, but it's really not that much money when you think about the average, Hollywood film. This is a documentary, but I think an average Hollywood film these days is about $80 million or something. Oh, sure,
but this is your dream. This is you don't have a big studio behind you. You don't have Eisner and Katzenberg and Spielberg and
right.
Their connections. You're a guy from Montana who currently lives in Simi Valley.
Yes.
Seriously, but that's something that I want everybody to be.
But you know what it is too is when you have something that is special and important. The people, I was really blessed with the people that came on board. They all caught the vision and they understood and they all could have got paid more money than they could have, but they all took less money because they wanted to work on the projects. They knew that it was an important project to get done. And so would have cost me even more than over the $200,000 range. But people realized that it was a special project.
What do you think is the most, what is something like, once the documentary's done, it's out there, it's doing its thing. I mean, what's the one thing that you will always take away from this, like the most special aspect of what you're doing?
Well, I think for me, it's been really an honor to get to know all the veterans. I had known some veterans before, but working on this project, I've met so many of these guys and got to hear their stories and got to let them know that I appreciate them and to say thank you to them. Some of them have already passed away, in the last 5 years since I've known some of them. So I think in working on this project, it really has even made my appreciation stronger for the veterans. It's always been strong, but learning about this story and what these guys went through, and that's, I think, what I take away, just to make my appreciation even stronger for who they are, and all the troops, World War II guys and Korean, Vietnam, all the way till today. Well, and you've become a voice of almost a whole generation. Because one of the things I was reading about you gave this great quote. You said, they were the living legends of World War II. You were talking about the guys from the 82nd Airborne Division, the veterans Bob Murphy, Bill Tucker, Don Lasson, and Bob Piper. Yeah.
And you were quoted as saying they had so many stories to tell about the D-Day invasion. Each one was different, each one compelling. But the one common thread among them was their love from Madame Renaud and everything she did to preserve the memories of those soldiers that were killed. That's really, that's in essence motherhood. That's, motherhood in a nutshell. And, you are now creating a documentary living history of these living legends.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it's pretty neat. I feel, like I said, really blessed to be, I guess, the one to help to tell her story. I couldn't believe it hadn't been told when I, talked to Henri Jean. I said, "So this hasn't been done as a film yet?" And he said, "No." So I figured, I guess I was the guy to do it. So I made the commitment, and as I said, it took 5 years, but no regrets.
Now, what's amazing too is you're doing a documentary on someone that died just 10 years prior. She died in 1988. Is that correct?
Yes, 88. Yep.
And your documentary, you started production in, maybe my math is wrong.
No, I started back around 2005, at the end of 2004, actually, is when I first, I learned about the story in June of 2004 when I was over there. And then not long after that, a few months after that, I started to go and interview the guys. And then it was, so it's actually been almost, this June it'll be 6 years. I thought it was 5.5 years, but this June. But I finished it a couple months ago, so I guess I got it done under 6 years.
That's amazing. Let's talk a little bit about, the subject of your documentary, because she's an amazing woman beyond just the letters, beyond just some of the things. She had spent decades building this bridge of good relations between France and America. But it wasn't just letters. It was photographs. It was poems. Can you talk a little bit about her poetry and where that appears in the United States?
Well, she does have the interesting thing is, which you'll find out in the movie, is which is the neat piece of history, is Madame Renaud's father, his name was Paul Cornier. He was a servant of Edmond Rostand in the 1840s, 1850s. As a lot of people probably know, Edmond Rostand wrote the play Cyrano de if I could say it, Cyrano de Bergerac. Thank you.
Attaboy.
And so he wrote that, and so Madame Renaud, they were like a second family of sorts, as the writer in the screenplay wrote, and so they kind of helped young Madame Renaud, young Simone Renaud, and with her education, and Mrs. Rostand was a poet, and that's where she got her love of poetry from, Mrs. Rostand. And so she was known as an international poet, Madame Renaud was, and her book, she had at least one or two books in French, published in French. I don't know if they were over, I think actually Maurice, her son, had republished one or two of her books in English, so her poems are available in English. I don't know the name of the books off the top of my head, but I could always...
Okay, well, listen, I don't mean to cut you off, but we got to get back to... we need to get to break, and
Sure.
I'm going to ask you a little bit more about Madame Renaud when we get back. We're here at Military Mom Talk Radio with Tina Gonzalez, Sandra Beck, and we have Doug Stebleton of www.motherofnormandy.com. Please check it out. Hey, military moms, this is Sandra Beck here, and we have my lovely co-host, Tina Gonzalez. It's perfect because it is, the day after Mother's Day, the whole point of bringing on, Doug Stebleton and his documentary, it is Mother of Normandy, and it's, just been Mother's Day. This is our, official Mother's Day show. So to bring on this amazing woman who for so many years cared for the remains and cared for the graves of these soldiers, I just think it's so perfect. And I think she, of anyone, would appreciate you being there with 7 kids in your house.
Yeah.
I hope so.
So, Doug, let's go back to you. And if you can finish up telling me, we were talking about her photography, about her letters, her poems. She's just such an amazing woman.
Yeah, as I said, she did write some books on poems. She wrote tons of letters, and she did make it to America, I think, a couple times to visit some friends on the East Coast. And I think she made it to Tucson, Arizona. And but she was all about keeping the link between America and France alive. And her mantra was to never forget, to teach everybody in Normandy to never forget what happened. The sacrifices of the soldiers.
It is. That is. I mean, it's just such a beautiful thing. It's such a gift. I can only imagine. I hope I never face the point that someone would have to tend to the grave of my children. But it's definitely a sobering thought to think of. How many people, got relief from what she thought she would. What she did.
Well, when you think about it, this was 1944 and 45 and 46, so it was a different, you couldn't just hop on a plane and fly over there, especially when the war was still on, and, to go over there, if you take a boat, it's like, 2 weeks, 10 days to 2 weeks, so to have someone over there to be, your hands and feet, and to do that to your son or your husband's grave, I'm sure just meant a lot to these people. I mean, it did, because I've read the letters, and they all say the same thing, that they appreciated how much they wanted to be there themselves, but they couldn't be there, and to know that she was doing it just gave them peace, and comfort.
Absolutely. It's funny, Doug, I had to watch your documentary film trailer like 5 or 6 times, before I went to meet you in person, because I was like, gosh, I don't think I can, I can't talk about this subject material, without getting all weepy. Your website is amazing, and I encourage anybody listening today to go to his website. It's www.motherofnormandy.com. It's got beautiful music. It's got beautiful imagery. There's some trailers. There's a 3-minute and a 6-minute on YouTube, so you can look them up on YouTube. You can just Google Mother of Normandy, and a lot of this stuff comes up. So let me ask you, Doug, you put together this film, and there's a link to the American Legion that's beyond what originally was intended. Can you explain another serendipitous moment for your film?
Well, I'm not sure which part you're talking about, but the American Legion. Yeah, I know. Okay, now I know what you're talking about. Yeah, well, it happens that Teddy Roosevelt Jr., who was a brigadier general, who, as I said earlier, who won a Medal of Honor actually on Utah Beach posthumously, but he died about 5 weeks after landing on the beach and was buried in the cemetery in Sainte-Mère-Église, and that's because of the photograph in Life magazine was her putting flowers over his grave. Well, it happens that a lot of people maybe don't know this, but back after World War I, Teddy Roosevelt was a seasoned veteran of World War I, and he and 2 other gentlemen are the ones that started the American Legion. And so it happened that Jeffrey Stouffer, who is the managing editor of the American Legion magazine, I had sent him some information and the DVD trailer, and was hoping that he'd write a story about the film in the book. In the magazine, the American Legion magazine, and I got him on the phone, and it happened also that we talked, and it happened that he used to live in Montana, and me being from Montana, so we had that connection. And then he was intrigued by the story and decided to do an article, and then the Legion actually decided to send him over to Normandy for the anniversary about 4 years ago, in 2006. 4 years ago. So there's this neat connection with the American Legion and Teddy Roosevelt Jr. and Jeff, who not only wrote the story, a story in the magazine, but we were trying to figure out who to write the screenplay, the script for the film. And after reading Jeff's story, we said, this guy's a great writer. Let's just hire him. So we ended up hiring Jeff to write the script for the film, and he did an excellent job. And then also we decided to do a coffee table book on Mother of Normandy, and I hired Jeff to write that also. So this guy is a great writer. I think he's got a bright future in writing for documentary films and books. That's
it's just amazing how many things this has spawned just from, who would think in 2004 was it when you first came on to this idea?
Yep.
Did you ever think in a million years you'd be where you are today?
No, I didn't really know. I just knew I had to do it, and wherever it took me. So I just, but it's been, like I said, the journey has been great. All the people I've met and the stories and places I've gotten to go because of it, I wouldn't change a thing, even though it's taken longer. I think it's the timing is right that it's getting done now, rather than maybe 2 years ago or something. I don't know, but it just has seemed to work out really good.
Well, and the people you've met along the way, I mean, it's got to be just one amazing, it's just got to be one amazing adventure. And it's just actually you're just beginning, the second phase of this. I mean, the production is done, but now we start on with the film festivals, and you have not only a film festival coming up. Let's talk about the film festival first, then we'll talk about what's going to go on in France in June. Great.
Well, the film festival, the first one that I entered it in, which was, I thought, just perfect for it, was the GI Film Festival, which is all about honoring the veterans, the troops. So I sent it to them, and it was actually a work in progress. It wasn't totally finished, but they saw where it was going, and they accepted it, and since then it's been finished, and now they have the final version. So that's going to be the GI Film Festival is in Washington D.C. at the Carnegie Institution, May 12th through the 16th. And Mother Normandy screens on Saturday the 15th at 2 p.m. at the Carnegie Institution. And I will be there. I'm actually leaving Wednesday to go there, and I'll be there to see it on the big screen. And also Jeff Stouffer, the guy I just talked about, the writer, he's going to fly in from Indiana. And so that's going to be kind of neat, and we'll see how that goes. And then after that, I've entered it in the last week into about 10 other film festivals, but it takes a month to 2 months for them to actually respond to let you know if you've been accepted or not. So I'll know more about that in the next month or two, but I am entering in some other festivals. And then the next screening will be, which I think is very appropriate, it's going to be in Sainte-Mère-Église, the town that it's about, where Madame Renaud and the mayor were from. And it's going to be screened on D-Day, which would be June 6th, in Sainte-Mère-Église at 8 p.m. that night, and we're going to have it open for free to the public and the tourists and whoever want to see it. So, and also Leslie Caron, who is the voice of Madame Renaud in the film, will be coming from Paris, where she lives, and she will be the guest of honor for the day and night for the premiere. So, give me a little history about her. We haven't touched on her. She's the voice in your documentary. Yes. Now, I've heard of her, but I bet a lot of our listeners haven't. Well, Leslie Caron is a French actress, but her mother was an American, her father was French, but she was a ballerina, and Gene Kelly found her when he was in Paris for something, and when he decided to do the movie An American in Paris, I believe that's the name of it, he chose Leslie to be his co-star. And that was a big hit. And from there on, she went on to do Gigi and some movies with Fred Astaire, Father Goose with Cary Grant, and she was in Chocolat about 10 years ago as Johnny Depp. And she's a great actress, and she's been doing it since I guess the 50s, sometime in the early 50s when she started. That's amazing. I mean, to have such a talented and amazing woman, how did she get involved in the project? Well, Kathy Soroff, my friend from from Locust Valley said we should get her to be the voice. She'd be perfect. And I said, that'd be great, but I don't know her. So she said, well, I know that she has a bed and breakfast outside of Paris. So she after the Cannes Film Festival 2 or 3 years ago, she dropped off a Mother of Normandy packet and left it with Leslie at her place. And she was not there, but I guess about 3 or 4 months later, she responded to her via email and said, I want to do this project. It's very close to home, and I must do it. And so that's how she got involved. And when I met with her in Paris for dinner, I asked her, I said, Leslie, I really appreciate you doing this project. I said, this is a small project, and you're an Academy Award-nominated actress and stuff. Why did you do it? And she said, well, I was a teenager during the occupation in Paris and also in the south of France where we lived. And she said, I remember the Germans, marching through our town and smelling the fish oil on their boots. And she said, so when I knew what Madame Renaud did for the GIs, she said, I understood because I remember seeing the GIs coming off the beaches in the south of France liberating us. So she said, I had to do this film.
That is so amazing.